Today's episode of the Athletic Fantasy Baseball Podcast is sponsored by the NBA and their quest to advance the game of basketball, grow the community, and impact culture. The league celebrates its teams, players, and fans across the past, present, and future as part of its 75th anniversary season. That's Game highlights pivotal moments on court and beyond, from iconic plays in arena to the impact players have in the community. That's the NBA. That's Game. Like in the NBA Finals, Giannis's iconic Game 4 block. I'll remember that play forever. I'll tell the kids I don't even have yet about that play for years to come. And just a couple nights later, when the Bucks had their backs against the wall, Drew Holiday makes a steal, pushes the break, throws an alley-oop to Giannis for a huge dunk. That seals Game 5 and pushes the Bucks even closer to that second title in franchise history. That's the NBA. That's Game. This is more than just basketball. It's what connects us all and keeps us coming back for more. That's the NBA. That's Game. Welcome to the Athletic Fantasy Baseball Podcast presented by Topps. Check out Topps Project 70, celebrating 70 years of Topps baseball cards. Derek Van Riper here with Michael Beller. It is Sunday, August 15th, bright and early on the West Coast. Thanks to those of you who join us from the West Coast on the live stream on occasion, because it is early here, and I am still getting used to it. How's it going for you on this Sunday, Beller?
It's going good. Back in your old time zone, 9:05, feeling good, feeling fresh. Got some coffee here, but just because I like the coffee, not because I need it to fuel my 7:05 showtime, anything like that. So feeling good, man. Let's talk some waivers.
I'm going to spend my week building a Rube Goldberg that gets my French press going for me, because there's no automatic start button on that. It's the one downside of not using a coffee machine, is just having to sit there and manually go through the process. But let's begin with some bats. Lots of interesting bats to talk about. Actually, a really nice week on the waiver wire for mid-August. Usually things aren't quite this robust, but we begin this week with Lewis Brinson. He was the subject of Under the Radar, at least one segment on that show, as he often is, but it seems like it might finally be happening. If you look back here at the last few weeks, he's been one of the hottest hitters in the league. He's showing some power, and more importantly, he's showing some improved plate discipline, which has always been the problem for Brinson when he's had chances at the big league level in the past. For the season now, 50 games with the Marlins, a 275, 315, 507 line. That's a 123 WRC plus. That tracks to be about a 2.5 win player if he did that over a full 150 plus. So he's ticking a lot of boxes right now, and I think the question is, how far are you willing to go in terms of shallow mixed leagues in picking up Brinson right now?
Yeah, I think I would probably go all the way to 12ers, Derek, because of what we've always known Lewis Brinson could be if and when he reached this level of play for a consistent stretch of time. And I'm willing to at least bet that this might be happening, that it might be happening. We've seen enough. You listed where his triple slash is for the season. He woke up on August 1st at 233, 266, 400. And now he's where you said he was, 275, 315, 507. So obviously there's a little bit of a small sample in there, but he has looked great over these last 2 weeks. And with the player that he has it in himself to be, combined with what he's done in his recent performance, I'm willing to take a shot on him as shallow as that, because this could very well continue for the remainder of the season. You're really asking for just another, 6 good weeks out of him. And with what we've seen him do recently, I think it's a good bet you want to make.
Yeah, tools on tools on tools. If you go back to the old scouting reports on Brinson, and certainly it's just nice to see a guy like this have some success after up and down these seasons and frustration, even in a prolonged opportunity a few years ago, just not looking like the guy that should have been the centerpiece of that Christian Yelich trade. Even if that never comes back around, Lewis Brinson can be a good player. I just like that the Marlins are giving him every opportunity to show that he can be a part of their future. These next 6 weeks are obviously very important for him to really solidify playing time for 2022 as well. And I'm with you. I think at least in 12-team leagues where you're starting 5 outfielders, you're looking for some help, you're looking for a guy who's going to play every day, Lewis Brinson is going to get that done for you. Let's move on to another favorite of this show, Dalton Varsho. He is starting to hit. Since the All-Star break, 305, 414, 610. That's a 1024 OPS if you like to add parts of the slash line together. 5 homers, 12 RBIs, 3 steals during that span, and an 11-15 walk-to-strikeout ratio, too. So He's doing all the things we saw him do as a minor league player, and now he's doing it at the big league level with more consistent playing time. Kind of a similar question in the leagues where he's still out there. I mean, is Dalton Varsho easily an option now in 10-team, one-catcher leagues? Basically, is he a top 10 catcher with what he's shown you of this last month?
I think he is. I really think he is, Derek, and I don't want to abdicate my responsibility as an analyst on this show by saying that it's self-evident, but it sort of is self-evident. Look at what he's done over the recent term. I don't see what else he could do that you would need convincing on him. He has shown us really everything across the board that you would want to see from him. We knew he was going to get a chance at some point this season in Arizona. So if we all go back to March and ask ourselves, what would you need to see out of Dalton Varsho to believe in him as a top 10 catcher? You would say basically what you said leading into why he is making another appearance in this show. He has done every single thing that we would realistically ask and expect of him to think of him as a top 10 catcher, or at least someone who could be a top 10 catcher for the remainder of this 2021 season. So I think that this is an easy one, an absolute slam dunk. Dalton Varsho, I don't care if you're playing 10-team, I don't care if you're playing 15-team, single catcher, double catcher, whatever the case may be, there is no actual fantasy format that exists that does not include Dalton Varsho as a roster fixture for someone.
So it's a little bit of a sweet apples to sour apples comparison, not apples to oranges, because they're both outfield eligible. But if you're looking at Brinson versus Varsho as the two best hitters on the wire in your league this week, who do you prefer?
Yeah, if you're actually going to be playing them both in the outfield, I think I would still go with Varsho just because we've seen it a little longer. We've seen it just a little bit longer from him. We have a little bit more to go on this season than we have from Brinson, but a good argument on Brinson's behalf could convince me that I'm wrong and Brinson's the guy to go here. It really does feel like that sour apples to sweet apples sort of comparison, because both of these guys I think should be rostered pretty much across the board.
Yeah, it's like a Honey Crisp and a Granny Smith, I guess, would be the specific apples that I'm talking
about. Look at that
about.
apple variety knowledge just right off the top of the head.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in the produce section, unfortunately. So the Varsho thing that's also pretty interesting, if you look at his spray chart, he actually hits the ball pretty well to all fields. And if you look at even the doubles and the home runs, those are scattered all over the diamond as well. It doesn't look like a dead pull approach. So I think that gives him a little bit of buffer. I'm not sure if I'm buying more than 20 home run power when it all comes together for him. But for a guy that is catcher eligible, that's perfectly fine. He walks, as we've said many times. He doesn't strike out a ton. I think the batting average floor is higher than it is for most catchers, and he can run. He's in the 89th percentile for sprint speed as well, so it's legitimate speed that backs up the stolen bases. It's not just the guy that only can pick his spots and takes advantage of the occasional, bad battery. It's always nice to have players that do that, but he's more than that at this point. Let's get to one of the many players who's been back from an injury recently. Lorenzo Cain is back, and he seems to be very healthy again. Not just the hobbled version of Cain we've seen off and on for parts of the last 2 seasons, really. I mean, I felt like in the shortened season, every time I saw Cain, well, it was early in the year, he was just didn't look quite right, and then throughout 2019 even was pretty banged up.
Yeah.
Didn't look like the guy in year 1 that he was with the Brewers. Looking at him right now and thinking about how difficult it is to find speed, what's your interest level in Cain where he's available?
It would have to be a speed thing, right? I would really need the speed to be going after Lorenzo Cain. It feels like the sort of player who's going to have much more of an impact in the real world, especially with the Brewers cruising to an NL Central title and a playoff berth and looking like they could be very dangerous with the top 3 in their rotation, rather than someone who is going to make a big splash in fantasy leagues those days. Simply behind him, there's really no path, I don't think, to him getting back to the top of the order in Milwaukee either. So we're talking about a guy who's locked into the bottom third of his order, who's really going to be a steals only, maybe some modest contributions in rate and runs categories, but really you're looking for the speed here. So I would have to be hard up for speed to want to get in on Lorenzo Cain. If that is me, if I am looking for a steals first and I don't really care so much what else this guy is bringing to the table, then I can get in on Lorenzo Cain at a relatively modest bid level, maybe 3%, something like that. But it would have to fit those narrow parameters for me to want to be interested.
Yeah, I think with Cain, he's the kind of guy I would use to replace Victor Robles if I was still waiting for Robles to turn things around in a redraft league, especially. Yeah, I'm still waiting on Victor Robles. Don't worry, I'm not giving up completely. I'm just now shifting my focus to 2022 as it pertains to him. So good news if you're going to listen to this podcast in the offseason and next draft season. A lot of Victor Robles talk still coming.
Robles.
Lowest price ever. How could you not? How could you not invest at this point? Let's get to another one of the guys in the outfield that I thought stood out to me this week on the wire. It's Connor Joe, and he's a Rocky, and he's playing. That's my best argument for him.
It's a good argument.
So maybe he's a little bit schedule dependent. Maybe you want to look at him and use him only when the Rockies are at home and not use him on the road. But I think he's exceeding expectations. 277, 351, 471 right now for the slash line. He's old. He's got nothing left to prove at AAA. He was tearing up AAA when he was down there at Albuquerque earlier this season. Are you in on Connor Joe, at least in deeper mixed leagues?
Yeah, I am definitely in on Connor Joe in deeper mixed leagues for exactly what you said. He's Rocky, and he's playing, and he's leading off. Also, he's doing a lot of leading off as well, so that's good. And it feels like he's locked in to that leadoff spot because, right, I mean, he's leading off against righties, he's leading off against lefties. It doesn't really matter who's on the mound; he's getting the lead off. So you throw that in the mix as well, so you can pretty much count on 4.5 plate appearances per game out of Connor Joe, and that makes you feel even better about him. You love the power that you've seen in this short-term stint here, over 134 plate appearances, 6 homers and 5 doubles. As you said, the 471 slugging percentage. That's going to play. That's absolutely going to play pretty much regardless of format. So I'm definitely up for kicking the tires on Connor Joe. Has a little bit of a roundedness to his game that maybe we didn't expect to see from him since we've seen so little of him in the majors. And as you said, old, already into his age 28 season. But with what we've seen from him, I'm definitely on board with giving him a shot in, pretty much across the board sort of formats.
Yeah, I mean, even just as a streamer, as a hitter, 6 games all at home in Colorado. He's got 3 lefties lined up too. Ryan Weathers, who's been struggling lately. Blake Snell, who's having a down year overall. And then Caleb Smith, who I would say is very hittable, especially at Coors Field. So a really nice schedule for Connor Joe and the Rockies. If you're a right-handed Rocky this week, things are definitely trending in the right direction. Let's get to another one of the injured veterans. Evan Longoria is back. He returned on Saturday. Beller, I think I just believe in the Giants like more and more every day. And if you're watching us on YouTube, I'm wearing a Padres hat. I'm not a Padres fan. I just like the hat. Common refrain on this podcast lately. I just like the hat. Nando DeFino's walking around Wegmans in Florida a few years ago wearing and that's not Wegmans in Florida, it's Publix, wearing a Sabres hat. Well, he just likes the hat. He's not a Sabres fan. Evan Longoria, though, it's kind of like what we were seeing with Joey Votto in recent weeks, where everyone thought he was done. I thought he was done. And what he was showing us pre-injury was evidence to the contrary. So I'm definitely in on Longoria where he's out there. I think he's the kind of guy that has slipped under the radar just a little bit. I think because this lineup has actually improved since Longoria's injury, the counting stats on a per-game basis should be better down the stretch than they had been on a per-game basis to this point.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a good argument to make there. I guess the one lone concern I would have with him is with the addition of Chris Bryant, does he get squeezed a little bit in terms of playing time? He was playing every day before he went on the IL. Now, Chris Bryant has played in the outfield for the Giants the last couple of games. He played more outfield than he did third base with the Cubs this season. We know he is very capable in both corners and can even play a little bit of center field if you need him out there. So there's ways you move Chris Bryant around where he doesn't play third base, but he's also going to play a little bit of third base. And you look up and down the Giants lineup, and it's like, who do we know is going to play every day in this lineup? It's Bryant, Brandon Crawford, Buster Posey insofar as a catcher is an everyday player. And is that it? I really think that might be the extent of everyday players in San Francisco. And then we're going to see Gabe Kapler mix and match Longoria and Belt and Lamont Wade and Mike Yastrzemski and Alex Dickerson and Tommy LaStella and all those guys. So I would still get back in on Longoria. I would just caution against assuming he's an everyday player.
Yeah, and I think maybe with Longoria, that was a concern even before Bryant, just because of his age. I'm looking back at the game logs on the baseball reference page I really like is that batting orders page. If you go to any team page, you go to other batting orders, like shows you every single lineup for every single day. You could choose a player, it highlights them. It's an awesome tool, and it's free. So, support baseball reference if you can do it. But if you look through, you see days off kind of like once a week. I mean, some of that, of course, minor injuries that maybe he picked up along the way. But I don't know if they were pushing Longoria to a 99% playing time share anyway. But yeah, instead of getting 90%, maybe he gets 85 now with Bryant. So that probably keeps him out of like 10-team mixed leagues. But I think in 12s, Evan Longoria is at least a good corner because of the quality of that lineup around him. And those are words that I did not think I'd be saying
No.
4+ months ago. Let's get to another option at the corner, Carter Kieboom. I know there have been a lot of jokes made about the lack of barrels for Carter Kieboom to this point in his big league career, but he's in that sweet spot right now where he's just going to play a lot because the Nats need to see if he's a part of their future or not. I think what he's doing right now is probably indicative of the player he's likely to be most of the time. The slash line's at 250, 338, 375. I'd probably nudge that power number up to the low 400 range. It can work if the batting average sits in the 270, 280 range, and if he's able to cash in on opportunities to drive in runs, right? I mean, he's going to be a situationally dependent sort of player. I just don't think he has the ceiling that we once thought he had as a prospect, in part because even though he does occasionally barrel the ball, he does not make a lot of hard contact consistently, and so far, at least, he's striking out a little bit too much for a guy that doesn't do damage, right? If you don't have a lot of barreling ability, you have to make up for it by putting a ton of balls in play. To this point, Kieboom hasn't done that. I'm not saying he will always be this way, but I think he's more likely to be the guy that improves his K rate than the guy that improves his barrel rate based on some of the early things we're seeing from him.
I think that's a perfect diagnosis of the player, both short and long term, and it's why I am not really in on him this week. I'm in on him to the extent that if I miss out on some of the guys we've talked about and I do feel the need for a corner infielder, he's thrown in there as a contingency because he is, one of the, I would say, top-level contingency guys available. Brinson, Varsho, Longoria, these are guys you get excited about going after, especially, as you said right at the top of the show, in mid-August, where we're sort of resigned to just accepting whatever our FAB fate might be. We actually have a pretty decent crop of hitters available to us this week. Kieboom comes in that next group. If I really need the help at third or corner infield, I could see going after him because he's going to play every day, and he does have he still has that tantalizing, what if to him where we could see him put together a really nice 5 or 6 week stretch to end the season. So that's where I'm in on Kieboom. It's a small bid, and I'm going for all these other guys first. But if I have to fall back on him, I can certainly live with it.
Yeah, very deep leagues, I think, for Kieboom for the most part. Something with a long-term component, ideally more dynasty than keeper, because in a keep 5 scenario, he's obviously not going to show enough ceiling. In a keep 10 scenario, he's not going to show enough of a ceiling here down the stretch to justify that roster spot. One of the more versatile players on the wire in a lot of leagues that I really like right now is Aledmys Diaz, because we don't know when Alex Bregman is going to resume his rehab. It looked like he was close to returning. I thought Bregman was coming back earlier this week. We got a report of a setback, so no word yet as to when he goes back to AAA to start playing in rehab games again. As a result, Diaz, I think, plays pretty much every day. He's been moving around the infield, but most of his time has come recently at replacing Bregman. Aledmys Diaz has started every game for the Astros dating back to July 27th, which is just a nice volume of playing time in a lineup that is loaded. Like, even without Bregman, this is a team that puts plenty of runs on the board, so love the fact that you can play him corner, middle, first, second, third, and I think the skills here have always been a tick better than people give him credit for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm totally in on Diaz, easily going for him over Kieboom, for example. And this is something that I talk about a lot. I'm not sure how often it really comes through, but like, the Astros are going to the playoffs. The Astros are going to win the West. And if the Astros are going to do what they want to do in October, they have a much better chance of doing it with a fully healthy Alex Bregman. And now that he's had this setback, what do they gain out of pushing him? What do they gain out of bringing him back at even 90%? Like, absolutely nothing. This division is theirs. Maybe there's a run between them and the White Sox and the Rays, and who gets the 1 seed in the AL side of the playoffs. But, like, do you really care about that? Like, I don't think so. And you certainly don't care about it to the extent that you're pushing Bregman over having him 100% healthy in October. And so this all comes back to say, Abraham Toro obviously gone, there's going to be plenty of playing time for Aledmys Diaz, and everything you said is true. This is a great lineup, puts a ton of guys on base, crosses a ton of guys across the plate, has that great infrastructure around him. He has all the flexibility that he has, and his skills a little bit better than people have really ever fully given him credit for. I think Aledmys Diaz, an easy guy to get excited about, and maybe in even shallower leagues than you think, because I'm willing to bet that this playing time is going to be there for him, if not all the way through September, then at least into the first couple of weeks of September.
Yeah, I think the Bregman situation is one where they can afford to be careful. I think the A's are a little more of a threat to the Astros than a lot of people want to believe, but I do think the Astros are clearly the better team and are still more likely to come away with the AL West. But I think that affords a lot of buffer for Diaz. And if they want to give Jose Altuve a few extra days off in September to keep him fresh for October, Diaz can fill in that spot, right? Yuli Gurriel is old. Once he's back, give him some days off. Let Diaz play there. So I could see him being a near everyday player pretty deep into September as they try and get that roster as playoff ready as it can possibly be. One more versatile player to throw out there, Hoy Park, getting more playing time in Pittsburgh. Eligibility kind of varies from site to site. I've seen shortstop by default. I know he's played a little bit there. He's got 4 games played there already. He's an outfielder on a lot of platforms already because he's had 9 big league appearances in the outfield. In the minors, he played 28 games at second base and 25 at shortstop. So if your leagues use that, then, make your decisions accordingly. But this is just another guy that's going to play post-deadline because the Pirates need to see what they have for the future. He was so blocked with the Yankees. I'm just glad he's getting an opportunity. I think he's a near min-bid guy in most mixed leagues, but I do think he could be somewhat interesting because he was putting up really nice numbers throughout his time in the minors, but especially at AAA where he's starting to show a bit more power.
Yeah, I think you nailed that exactly. And what you come away here with is near min bid is the important thing to take away with Hoy Park. And the fact that he's going to play every day. Pittsburgh should get a good look at him over the remainder of this season. And he's going to give you a little bit of flexibility, regardless of what you're actually picking him up for. But there's even though there's enough to be excited about that we want to think about adding him in 15 teamers as a min bid sort of guy. There's not also the amount that we look for to push him anywhere beyond that. So I think that's really where he sits for this waiver weekend.
Let's get to a few more catchers, including one really good one. Travis d'Arnaud is back for the Braves. I think when you have a guy that spends a lengthy stint on the IL, the 60-day IL is a path for players to get cut. Unless you're in a league with unlimited IL spots, guys tend to end up on the wire. D'Arnaud, kind of like Evan Longoria, sort of forgotten about a lot of places, only rostered at 41% of CBS leagues, so I'm sure that number will skyrocket as FAB runs overnight tonight in many leagues. Where does d'Arnaud fall for you? We talked about Dalton Varsho being kind of a top 10 catcher at this point, and maybe a guy that you'd pick up in a single catcher 10-team league where available. Does that also fit d'Arnaud, given that Atlanta's lineup is not quite as powerful as we expected coming into the season? Or do you still see the skills that d'Arnaud has flashed over the last 2 years and say, yeah, he absolutely does belong in that group, even though that supporting cast isn't quite as good as we thought it would be?
I think he's probably just outside that group, maybe right on the fringes of that group, could be potentially at the back end of that group. He does lose the great environment that he's had around him, or loses a big chunk of the great environment he's had around him over the last couple of seasons, but the skills are there, and we know what the catcher position is, and you get him back, you throw him right back into the mix, and even if you're a little bit concerned about lingering injury issues and just rust, he hasn't played in a very long time, I still think that the skills are going to play more often than not. So I put him still as a guy who, if I didn't have a catcher who was just like a set it and forget it catcher in a one catcher league, then I'm at least giving some thought to d'Arnaud today. If I have a set it and forget it catcher, even if I think d'Arnaud's ceiling is higher than that guy, I'm not going after d'Arnaud because I feel comfortable enough to not want to roll the dice on a guy returning from injury.
A couple other interesting catchers to get to real quick. Austin Nola out there at a good number of leagues. Seems like he's finally getting healthy here in recent weeks. Yeah. Playing time share is probably more like 65 to 70%, but that's not that out of bounds for a number one catcher on a lot of teams that have quality backup options. Where are you at on Nola at this point? I think he's sitting at 33% rostered in CBS leagues. I've got him pretty clearly behind d'Arnaud, but I do think he's a good contingency option.
He's like the like bargain rate d'Arnaud for me, and I think about him the same way. Where set and forget it catcher, I'm passing on Nola. But if that's someone who maybe I'd like a little bit better, I could see going after Nola as the contingency to d'Arnaud. d'Arnaud first, Nola second, and I would again have to be in a situation where I don't have an auto start catcher that I feel comfortable with.
Yeah, I think these two guys are kind of a clear tier ahead of Yan Gomes, who's now working in a timeshare in Oakland. He's played about 50% of the possible starts since getting moved there. And then there's one more name, Yohel Pozo. I saw a home run from him on Quick Pitch the other day, and it's like, hey, look, anyone getting playing time this time of year is worth looking at to see if there's something there. 24-year-old does clearly have some pop. At AAA this year, was hitting 333, only a 346 OBP because he's walked just 6 times in 66 games, but 19 home runs. So look, a catcher that can do some damage, like sign me up. I'm intrigued, at least in really deep leagues where you got to start two of them. And this is a guy that was not really on my radar at all until the Rangers called him up.
Two catcher leagues, absolutely, right? I mean, I say this a lot too. I like to go back to some of my certain catchphrases. Right, in a two catcher league, show me a guy who has one reliable skill, and I will be on board with at least giving him a shot. And Pozo's shown us that. If you are buying the minor league numbers, then he has shown us that. And really, what else are you asking for out of your second catcher in two catcher leagues, especially 14, 15 team two catcher leagues? So he's getting the playing time. He has a skill that maybe plays up to the majors and might be reliable there. No problem taking a shot on him this weekend.
And just eyeballing their depth chart, they can play two catchers if they want to. They can have Heim or Trevino catch. They can play Pozo as the DH. Clearly has enough power to be used in that spot if they'd like to give him that opportunity, because the rebuild is in full effect for the Rangers. I don't know what their plan is. I've said that many times before, but I'd at least give Pozo a decent amount of playing time just to see if that bat can play against top-level pitching. But I do think that plate discipline could be exposed in a pretty big way. Only 6 walks in 66 games in the minors is an incredibly low walk rate. The presenting sponsor of the Athletic Fantasy Baseball podcast is Topps.com and Topps Project 70. Topps is celebrating the 70th anniversary of its very first baseball card design with a new program that pushes boundaries while paying homage to the company's heritage. Project 70 has brought together creators of all kinds for this extraordinary set. Graphic designers, tattoo and graffiti artists, animators, illustrators, painters, and even a jeweler make up the artist roster, which includes names like Snoop Dogg, Action Bronson, Ben Baller, Jeff Staple, Tyson Beck, Alex Pardee, and more. Each artist will select their own MLB players and Topps designs from any year to craft a unique story. Ever want to know what Chris Bryant would look like in a Giants uniform and in a 1977 Topps design? Or how about Mookie Betts in another classic template from the 1970s? Now you can. 3 new cards launch daily all year long on Topps.com and are only available for 70 hours before they're gone for good. And while you're there, be on the lookout for special cards. Head to Topps.com to learn more about Project 70 and to check out which cards are live right now. Well, the right outfit can bring out something special in us, and with Indochino, creating your best look yet could be more affordable than you think. And it may have been a while since the last time you had an excuse to dress up, but whenever that next chance is, make the absolute most of it. Ordering online with Indochino is easy. Indochino offers completely custom-fitted suits, shirts, casual wear, and more at surprisingly affordable prices. Every piece is made to your exact measurements, and you can customize every detail. Choose everything about your suit from the fabric, lapel, monogram, and statement linings. And you can create a suit that fits you and your style perfectly. Want to get your initials on there? Get a little DVR on there. We'll get your own initials. Don't actually put DVR on your suit. That'd be kind of weird unless those are your initials too. The best part, Indochino's suits start at just $3.99 with all customizations included. Indochino is now open at select Nordstrom stores, giving you even more ways to get great fitting, personalized clothing. Find your nearest location at Indochino.com. Right now, you can get $50 off any purchase of $3.99 or more by using the code AthleticMLB at checkout. That's $50 off a purchase of $399 or more at INDOCHINO.com with the promo code AthleticMLB. All right, let's get back to some waiver wire pickups. Let's talk about some pitchers, and it's hard to believe, but there are some leagues out there, Beller, where Chris Sale is still available on the waiver wire. And the matchup this week is great. He's home against Texas. I don't even care about that. I'm just glad that Chris Sale is back and healthy. We saw him make his season debut on Saturday. I saw at least 196 while I was watching that start, so there was plenty of velocity. Maybe he was a little bit amped up, but 8 Ks, got the win, looked mostly like himself, at least based on my eye test. And in the leagues where he's available and where you've got a pile of FAB left or any FAB left at all, I think it's wise to use a very large share of that budget on Chris Sale.
I agree completely. This is what you have it for at the end of the season. There's not really that many guys left. There aren't that many FAB turns left. You want to leave some just in case you need to make an emergency move, but you also want to strike when you get an opportunity. And this is absolutely going to be the last opportunity to acquire a guy who can make this sort of impact for you. So I'm with you. Even if you feel like pitching isn't a huge need, You just don't get an opportunity to add Chris Sale to your team on August 15th very often, even if he isn't the Chris Sale of old, even if he isn't the inner circle best pitcher in the majors, one of the top 3 guys, Chris Sale, that he used to be, still a damn good pitcher. And so I think that this is one where you need pitching, you don't need pitching. This is the best player available. And how often do we talk about that in the fantasy world? You take the best player you can get. You don't worry about position in drafts. You get the best player. You worry about position later. When you're making a trade, you want to get the best player. You would rather be getting the dollar rather than the 250-cent pieces. Chris Sale is absolutely the dollar who is available on the waiver wire this weekend. So go after him without question. If it means emptying the budget, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, it's still a relatively small number of leagues, but it's not 100% rostered everywhere, which is really important at this point because we're going to see a lot of pitchers get shut down or have their workloads reduced over these final 6 weeks. And in a lot of cases, it's not going to be crystal clear and obvious as to how exactly that's going to go down. I think Casey Mize and the way the Tigers have used him is a pretty good example of how teams might change some of their plans kind of on the fly. They may see something in various metrics with pitchers that they're looking at that they want to adjust to at various points. So just keep that in mind too. If you don't need pitching right now, you may need pitching 2 or 3 weeks from now. And Sale is a rare opportunity to get a top 20 pitcher pretty easily down the stretch if he happens to be available in your league. A few more widely available names we'll get to here, of course, over the rest of the show. Tyler Mcgill, with the bad news for Jacob deGrom, looks even safer in that Mets rotation. His performance, though, has been at a level where I think he kind of carved out a spot for a while anyway. What does he have to do to be universally rostered? We're through 50 innings for him now, 54 Ks against 13 walks, a 3.42 ERA, and a 1.16 whip. I mean, that plays pretty much everywhere, doesn't it?
I think so, DVR. And this is something I've talked about with Al on Fantasy Baseball in 15 a little bit. I think we get to a point of the baseball season where we just have to ignore the roster rates for guys like Mcgill. Like, I think he's been added pretty much wherever. But if he is sitting out there, I mean, what more does this guy need to do? He's done so much already. And if you go back, I mean, look at what he's done in just, I mean, over the course of the entire time since he's been in that rotation, you just see strong start after strong start, getting at least into the 6th inning in a lot of these outings that he's done. He's faced a whole range of opponents from, you know, the quote bad in the Marlins recently and the Brewers early on in his time, some starts against the Pirates. He's also looked pretty darn good against teams like Toronto. He got knocked around by the Dodgers a little bit his last time out, but still struck out 6 batters in 5 innings. I mean, he has faced a lot of different teams, a lot of different quality of teams. He's been in this rotation now since the end of June, and he's pretty much answered the bell every single time he's had an opportunity. So I think someone who absolutely, really, regardless of league size, needs to be on a team somewhere.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that. And I would agree that roster rates this time of year can be a bit misleading because there is a fall off for a lot of leagues out there where maybe a third of the teams are still competing and the rest have given up. That does happen and does influence those numbers just a bit. Let's talk about the guy that threw the no-hitter on Saturday, which was hilarious for me because I was putting this rundown together and I just clicked through. I was using the RotoWire projected starters grid, just kind of looking at some guys in my 12-team leagues who are widely available, and I see a T. Gilbert in the rotation for Arizona, and I open up a player page. I'm like, who's this guy? And the last news update says, throws no-hitter on Saturday. And I'm like, wait a minute, what? That's today. That just
this
happened.
Saturday?
Like right now? Like I was in a room without a TV and I just missed it because I didn't have Twitter.
Did I miss like some Little League World Series no-hitter or something? Like what's going on here?
Yes, I checked the name on the player page and I reread the player update probably about 3 times before I said, okay, this actually just happened. This is real. And Zach Buchanan's got a great story on The Athletic about it today. So the matchup that caught my eye was just a home matchup against the Phillies. Not necessarily a good start. I thought maybe 15-team leagues and deeper where you're not worried about ratios, you would take a chance. Obviously, throwing a no-hitter is going to push him to have some attention that he wouldn't have had otherwise. It was his 4th career big league appearance and his first MLB start. So a really cool story. This is a guy that has bounced around. Wasn't at the alternate site a year ago. He was a member of the Dodgers organization, was chosen by the Diamondbacks in the minor league portion of the Rule 5 draft. And if you look at the minor league numbers, the results have been pretty good. The underlying numbers aren't bad. I just don't know where we go from here. This is an amazing story. I don't know what chapter 2 of the Tyler Gilbert Major League story is going to look like when he takes the ball against the Phillies next time out.
Yeah, and it's really hard to then synthesize that into what does a FAB bid for him look like, because there's a lot of bad working against him, right? I mean, one of the bad things from a pure FAB context, as you said, is the fact that he just threw a no-hitter 12 hours ago. So now you got to contend with that. Maybe it's a rising price on him. And, do you really want to pay that for a guy who was making his first career start, is on a very bad team, you figure is not going to have a ton of win upside the remainder of the season? Like, there's a lot working against him. So I think you still want to keep yourself in check here when you're filling out your bid for him. But we've seen enough good from him at the minor league level. And, there's the list of no-hit pitchers is checkered with some guys who didn't exactly go on to great things in their career. Doesn't happen by accident either. And so we can take a little bit of solace in that. I feel decent enough about him to make him someone who is on my list of guys for throwing bids on this weekend, but still more a low bid contingency sort of guy rather than oh my God, this no-hitter is going to springboard him to great things over the remainder of the 2021 season kind of guy.
Yeah, trying to figure out like what he really brings to the table and how effective that's going to be. I don't really see a great secondary pitch. I mean, he's throwing a four-seamer, a cutter. Those two pitches about 91% of the time, and then a curveball and a splitter. So the secondaries don't really give me a lot of hope at this point. So I'd be very careful with Tyler Gilbert. Again, it's a great story, but I put him up here high in the rundown because I figured a lot of people would be curious, like, who is this guy and how did he do this? I honestly don't know, but I'm happy for him because it's a good story. Let's get to Cal Quantrill, though, who's been pitching really well recently at Minnesota, which, again, like I think beginning of the year you'd see at Minnesota and maybe you'd think twice about it, and then home against the Angels. Kind of same story there where Anthony Rendon at the beginning of the season, Mike Trout, they were healthy. They're not there right now, so yeah, you fear Shohei Ohtani, but the depth in that Angels lineup is still not enough to where you'd say, I'm staying away. So how do you feel about the two starts for Quantrill this week? And how do you feel about what you've seen from him overall here over the last month plus?
Feel great about these two starts. I think he's an easy guy to get behind for this two-start week. No question about that. I think the question does come in with him is, do you want to keep him beyond these two starts, especially if he throws the ball well? Are you feeling good enough about him to get him to keep him on your roster beyond that? I'm not so sure he's that type of pitcher with what we've seen from him this season. He has does have pretty good numbers on the season, right? 3.13 ERA, 1.23 WHIP, 76 strikeouts in 97 innings. It's really that last piece that does it for me. He's not going to be, I mean, forget about being a huge strikeout guy. He's not even going to be like a move the needle strikeout guy beyond just having a volume of innings, right? That's sort of why we like him in a two-start week, where he can maybe go out and give you 8 strikeouts in 12 innings while picking up a win and giving you decent rates. That's why we like him in these two-start weeks. But I don't think you really look at him beyond that. So you're in a very deep area. A volume of innings gives you some sort of fantasy value just on its own. And so if you're in that type of league, I could see keeping him around. If you're not in that type of league, I am all in on this two-start week, but I'm probably letting him go after that.
I kind of feel like if you like and roster Aaron Savali, then you should like and roster Cal Quantrill. I mean, I know they're their own guy and they have their own approach. They're individual people with their own personalities, their own pitch mixes. I just think the overall value is very comparable. I think they both kind of have average stuff, pretty good command, deep arsenals. And you could find some pretty soft landing spots in the AL Central, of course, too. I think that bodes really well, just matchup-wise, and probably explains a lot of why Quantrill's had some success.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the right way to be looking at him for sure. And that's why this is a good two-start week for him.
We talked a lot about Carlos Hernandez on Under the Radar. I think Ian made it very clear that he is all in on Carlos Hernandez, especially in leagues that have a long-term component, right? I mean, this is a guy that still has a lot of growth potential. The flaw right now would be command, relatively speaking, but plenty of pitches, good velocity, a clear opportunity because Kansas City needs someone to take the ball every fifth day, and it's a good slider. It's a good curveball. I'd actually like him quite a bit too. I think Ian's right to be in on Hernandez, and I think he's the kind of guy that if you're playing even in a redraft league, you're going to be surprised at what you get on a start-by-start basis. I think the problem we have is on the screen in front of us, the matchup. The first one, home against Houston, road against the Cubs. Like, yeah, I think you'd like to pick on your own favorite team as much as you possibly can down the stretch, but are you willing to go through Houston in weekly leagues to get that gem of a second start against the Cubs?
I mean, this is the perfect setup for this question. We have pretty much every week, right? There's someone who comes up who is an obvious start in his second start and an obvious bench if you're able to do that in his first start. And do you do it? Do you chance it if you have to play him in both of these starts? In this situation, I do DVR. I'm willing to take it. That Cubs lineup is a joke, and no offense to the players who are professionals and who are out there and who are, really trying their best. And it's been an ugly, ugly turn for the Cubs. Their second double-digit losing streak right now of the season. But that's a lineup that a good pitcher like Hernandez can really take advantage of. And so that, coupled with the fact that he could still give you some strikeouts against Houston. Like, I'm willing to risk it if I'm willing to risk a bad start against Houston, because he could still maybe give me, 5 strikeouts in 3 innings or 5 strikeouts in 4 innings. He can still do that for you. And then I just see him really taking advantage of the Cubs lineup that he gets over the weekend. And, just because he's going up against a good lineup doesn't mean that he's automatically going to get knocked around by that lineup. I could see him managing Houston and dominating the Cubs. And if you get that, then you're feeling really good. But even if that's not exactly how it plays out, with what we've seen from him to this point, coupled with the Cubs matchup over the weekend, I'm willing to roll the dice on that Houston matchup as well. So I will go ahead and take this 2-step.
Yeah, it hasn't been easy for him looking at some of his more recent starts. He had the Yankees back on the August 9th, 6 2/3, a 1-run ball there, 3 Ks. Had a road start against the White Sox, 6 Ks, 1 earned run over 5 innings there. A 6 scoreless against the White Sox at home the start before that. So he's been tested recently and survived it. So I think I'd be erring on the side of saying I'm playing him this week because I want that second start so badly. Obviously, things can go wrong. They have a lot of moving parts in Kansas City. Maybe there's some scenario that unfolds where he gets Houston and doesn't make the second start, and that's not ideal. But the possibility of getting that Cubs start at the end of the week and what he's shown us so far, those things line up enough for me where I'm in on Carlos Hernandez for sure. I think he's probably in the same tier for me as Quantrill. I think Quantrill's floor is higher, even though I think Hernandez brings more of a ceiling to the table. Sort of depends on what you need for your team right now if you're trying to decide between those two. And in long-term leagues, I have more interest in Hernandez. If there's a keeper dynasty component, I think he's going to be the better long-term pitcher of the two. Another injured player coming back soon, Eliezer Hernandez. When I checked before we started the show, he did not have the start scheduled yet. He's actually on regular rest today, so they could have activated him from the IL to start on Sunday. Whether or not they do that, that remains to be seen. If you've seen news on that, let me know. But the quad injury that sidelined him, to me, it's not a big deal. He's pitched well in rehab. It's not a shoulder. It's not an elbow. And he was pitching well before he got hurt, too. He was firmly on the shallow mixed league radar, at least as a streamer, before going down. So I think he's one of those guys that people have probably forgotten about, who deserves to be in the conversation after Sale and maybe right there next to Tyler Mcgill. I think if Mcgill is someone you're going after, Hernandez is a great contingency bid behind him, or at least someone to think about putting right up in that same spot on your bid list.
I think I would. And honestly, DVR, I think I would go for Eliezer before I would go for Tyler Mcgill, just because of what we know he can be. And as you said, he's pitching well. I'd forget about the quad injury. Forget about it. It basically didn't exist other than the fact that it robbed him of 2 months of the season. It existed in that way. But at this point, from this point forward, it doesn't exist. We have any reason to think that it makes him more likely to be injured for the remainder of the season or suffer anything like that. I think if that were the case, Miami would just put the guy in mothballs and bring him back in 2022, because this could be a very good rotation, maybe a sneaky wild card contending sort of team next year with all the pitchers that they have there. And Eliezer Hernandez is a big, big part of that. And we know what this guy can be. We've seen evidence of it previously in his career. And that start we were so excited about in June that he came back for 5 innings, 6 Ks, looked the part, 3 hits, 1 run allowed, and then he gets the quad injury and he's done for another couple of months. So it's been an incredibly frustrating season for him. But let's remember where we were on this guy back in draft season. Drafted across the board. Shallow mixed league radar, absolutely. And I think it's more than just a streamer. I really want Eliezer Hernandez. To me, he is the Sale contingency more than a Mcgill contingency.
Yeah, maybe a little more stable because we've seen him have some success in the big leagues already. But I think Mcgill over Hernandez, they're right next to each other either way.
Yeah,
very comparable percentage of FAB that I'd be considering using on both of them. A few other pitchers I'll throw at you. Michaelis could be back this week. If he comes back, he gets the Pirates at home, though. I mean, I'd be careful with him because he's coming off of arm injuries. But at the same time, if I'm going to take a chance on a guy coming off the IL with arm injuries, it's probably going to be against a team like the Pirates.
That's definitely fair. I think that's a very diplomatic way to put the interest in Miles Michaelis. It's still a min bid for sure. I mean, right? The Miles Michaelis at his peak is not striking anyone out. He's probably not working super deep into games, so I could go after him because of that Pirates matchup, but I'm still going after a lot of other guys first. And if I need the innings, then sure, Michaelis can be a contingency guy.
Jaime Barria still struggling to miss bats. The results aren't bad, a 4.21 ERA and a 1.21 whip. He goes on the road to Cleveland this week, but be very careful there. When the contact rate is as high as it is against him, bad things can happen. I'm actually more interested in Reed Detmers, even though he's got a 10.61 ERA so far. I think he's still going to be good, especially in the long run. So I'm Detmers over Barria if you're looking at those two Angels pitchers. Ronaldo Lopez is back. He's supposed to start against Oakland, but he only pitched 3 innings last time out, and I haven't heard the White Sox say that they're going to use an opener in front of him, so you're probably not going to get a win in this spot, even if Lopez pitches well. But this is a guy that I've kind of wondered if the White Sox are going to deploy him as some kind of like multi-inning relief weapon come postseason, because it hasn't worked for him as a starter. The Carlos Rodon injury, though, has left the door open, at least temporarily, for him to get that opportunity one last time.
Yeah, I could see going after him with that in mind, even if you know that a win isn't really in the cards for him, just because he can give you pretty decent rates and strikeouts over a 3 or 4 inning outing. I could see going after him there. It would be interesting to see him as a multi-inning relief guy team in the postseason. Although, like, with all those arms they have in the bullpen, I mean, where do you even squeeze him in that sort of role with all those dudes that they've got out there? It's going to be a fun team to watch in the postseason for sure. But for our context here in this discussion, Ronaldo Lopez is, of those last few guys you listed off, he's probably the second one I would go after behind, grudgingly, Miles Michaelis.
And there's also Aaron Ashby, who made a start as part of the doubleheader that the Brewers and Pirates had on Saturday. I think he's more of a stash in long-term leagues and NL-only formats. I think the Brewers have to decide he's an upgrade over Brett Anderson and Eric Lauer if they're going to put him in the rotation on a regular basis. But he looked really good against Pittsburgh, and I think sort of like Lopez, probably has a more flexible role, which could be a little challenging in a lot of leagues. So just keep an eye on him and see if we get some clarity on how exactly the Brewers intend to use Ashby, because the stuff absolutely passed the eye test. Looked really good back in spring training, too, if you caught any of those highlights back in March. With summer in full swing, I'm swapping out winter warmth with easy, breezy comfort for the season with award-winning sheets from Brooklinen. I mean, I live in Northern California now. I think it's kind of like summer all the time. One of the coolest things about Brooklinen is they've got so many options. When it comes to prints and colors, they whip up new styles every season. It's important to be stylish, especially out here on the West Coast. Brooklinen's sheets also pair perfectly with the rest of their bedding essentials like cozy comforters, pillows, and duvet covers. And since everyone knows summer comfort goes beyond the bedroom, they've also got some seriously great bath towels, robes, and beach towels too. All this high-quality, luxury-grade comfort without the luxury price tags. It's no wonder why Brooklinen's got over 75,000 5-star reviews. So go on, get summer ready with quality comfort and get it for less at Brooklinen. Go to brooklinen.com and use the promo code ATHLETIC to get $20 off with a minimum purchase of $100. That's BROOKLINEN.com. Enter promo code ATHLETIC for $20 off with a minimum purchase of $100. That's brooklinen.com with the promo code ATHLETIC. This episode of the Athletic Fantasy Baseball Podcast is brought to you by Rise, a science-based app that makes it easy to improve your sleep to increase your daily energy. Do you know that it's normal to feel groggy when you wake up and sluggish in the afternoon, but it's not normal to feel tired throughout the day? That's an indication you're carrying sleep debt, limiting your natural energy peaks and making your dips less productive. Every morning, Rise tells you how long you'll be groggy, when your peak focus times will be, and when you should start winding down for better sleep and more energy the next day. Moving is terrible. I can tell you a lot of stories about that. I've done it enough times, but I'm still trying to get used to Pacific time. I'm going to get going on this Rise Sleep app and try to figure out how to sleep more effectively and make my days more productive with the move out west. Rise helps you realize your potential with real results, real productivity, real performance, and real well-being. Go to risescience.com/fantasymlb and download the Rise app to try it for free for 7 days. Most Rise users feel the benefits in just 5 days, so try it today to learn more about your sleep and energy levels, plus feel better, all for free during the trial. Whether you want to become a morning person, be less exhausted during the day, or improve your productivity and daily energy, Rise is the power behind your next best day. That's risescience.com/fantasymlb to try the Rise app free for 7 days. All right, Beller, a few more arms to look at, mostly some two-step considerations. Vladimir Gutierrez caught my eye because this combination of matchups really could be the best possible combination you can have. He is home against the Cubs, home against the Marlins. If you've been in a league where Gutierrez hasn't really been rostered all year, this might be the week where he actually gets rostered, and rightfully so.
And Gutierrez has been someone who's like popped up in at least the stream discussion basically since he's become a rotation fixture in Cincinnati. Not someone who's bullied his way into being a guy who sticks on rosters, but definitely someone who's lived in that just beyond region. Someone who's a comfortable streamer. He doesn't need these slam dunk matchups to be a streamer either. He's someone who we could stream against, better teams than this. But I mean, come on. I mean, I think you're right, DVR. This probably is the best. Is it maybe the Pirates would be in the mix here also for like the very best two-step stream matchups you could possibly get, but this is in the team picture for sure. Getting the Cubs, getting the Marlins, this is an easy one to get on board with, and so easy to the extent that like if immediate returns were very important to me, I could see going after Gutierrez before I went after maybe Mcgill. I mean, maybe that's maybe a bit of a stretch, but if I really needed these immediate returns, this is such a good run of matchups that I could see going after Gutierrez before everyone other than Sale and Eliezer Hernandez that we talked about. Mcgill might be a stretch, but definitely after Mcgill, he's the next guy who I'm going after, even if I feel better about Carlos Hernandez, say, for the long haul of the rest of the season.
Yeah, strange schedule twist here. The Reds go on the road to face the Marlins after this week, so he'll have 2 consecutive starts against Miami, so I think that makes Gutierrez more than just a two-step streaming option here. Mitch White getting some opportunities for the Dodgers. Only went 4 innings the last time out, but he should make both of these turns. Has the Pirates at home for the first one, Mets at home for the second one, and if he sticks around in the rotation beyond that, he's got Colorado at home the week after that. So another team that you look at and say, especially outside of Coors, I'm streaming away there. There was some prospect intrigue with White a couple of seasons ago, so I think he belongs on the radar. I think he's still more of a deeper league, like 14, 15 team mixed league sort of guy at this point, but definitely worth thinking about.
He's Gutierrez light, basically, right? He's got lesser matchups, and he's a lesser pitcher who's shown us less so far in the majors. So he's a little bit worse than Gutierrez at every single thing we think about when we're making bids on these two-step pitchers, but definitely deserves to be in the discussion in 14, 15-team leagues.
We got Bayley Ober going home against Cleveland, road against the Yankees. A little bit of a tough second matchup, of course. Results haven't been off the charts good, but I think he's trending toward being more useful than not. I'm kind of a believer in Bayley Ober. Really tall guy, different sort of angle coming in for the hitter. I think that makes it really difficult for a lot of guys to square him up. I know he's had a home run problem so far. I don't think that's going to be who he is in the long run. A lot of good results in the minor leagues as well. So I'm definitely intrigued by Ober. I think the 2-start week could be his entry point onto a roster, and then he could be a very schedule-dependent guy that ends up with a lot of those aforementioned soft landing spots in the AL Central down the stretch.
Yeah, at Yankees scares me a little bit. It actually makes me more interested in Mitch White than it would be in Ober if I'm thinking about this purely as a 2-start exercise. Yankees obviously have turned things around and are, looking at chasing down the Red Sox and, making a move for at least the AL wild card. And a lot of that's been on the strength of the offense. So I'd be a little concerned about that matchup, not to the extent that I'm totally avoiding Ober if I need a 2-start pitcher, but he's the third of the 3 that we've talked about for me.
One more twin to get to, Griffin Jacks, kind of an interesting name. Same matchups, of course, home against Cleveland, road against the Yankees. A third-round pick, pitched at the Air Force Academy, and because of his military service obligations, hasn't had a completely straightforward development process in the minor leagues. So I'm curious if you have any interest in Jacks now that he's getting an opportunity in this Twins rotation.
Not right now, especially with that Yankees matchup looming over the weekend. Someone I think who's on a watch list, definitely. And if you can, if you're in a daily league, so you can grab him now and then play him against Cleveland and sit him against the Yankees, that's something I would consider. In a straight up weekly league where I have to have him in there against the Yankees, I'm probably staying away. But an interesting enough guy in 14 and 15 teamers that I'm keeping an eye on what he does this week for sure.
Yeah, I think Jacks, at least for AL-only leagues, is firmly on the radar at this point. Maybe Dynasty leagues as well, just because I think the stuff actually is a bit better than we realized. And the slider, at least, looks like a really good pitch for him. Mm-hmm. Josh Fleming, who in one fell swoop went from a 4.12 ERA and a 1.18 whip to a 4.96 and a 1.32 after getting hammered by Boston. Widely available. Gets the Orioles, gets the White Sox. I still trust him, even though it was a miserable outing for him last time out. Do you prefer him to the two Twins options at least?
I prefer him to Jacks, but not Ober. I'd be going for Ober first and then Jacks, just because we've seen a little bit more. And that first matchup, right, like White Sox-Yankees, I see that as a wash, especially with the White Sox basically back to full strength here. Orioles are a little bit better of a matchup for me than Cleveland. So, it gives me a little bit of good feeling in Fleming's direction here, but I would still rather go with Ober than him because we've just seen a little bit more consistency out of Ober thus far.
They're the two names I saw on the grid this week, neither of which is on my radar to be picked up. Braxton Garrett is home against Atlanta, road against the Reds. He's just been too hittable so far. Only an option if your ratios are a total mess in a very, very deep league. And then Jose Suarez at the Yankees, at Cleveland. I'm still treading really carefully with him. It's just been too up and down so far, but they're out there in really deep leagues if you're looking for some more help. I had one question here from Alfonso. Got in here late. One question. Bobby Dahlbeck in a 12-team head-to-head points league. Is he a good ad? I'm not really sold on Bobby Dahlbeck, Beller. I think there's just too much swing and miss in that profile right now, and I think they can mix and match in a way where maybe he begins to lose some playing time. So I know he homered twice, and there's a huge 16-run performance for the Red Sox on Saturday, but this profile really bothers me from a power hitter, and I think like a lot of the guys we've talked about that we generally veer away from or at least temper our bids for, he's stuck in the bottom part of that Red Sox lineup too.
Yep, I totally agree with you, and if the talk of Kyle Schwarber starting to play some first base for that team really comes to fruition, then Bobby Dahlbeck's really screwed because he's not getting in the outfield. He's not getting the DH spot with JD Martinez locking that down. If Schwarber does show himself to be just a serviceable at best first baseman, and let's remember, like, no one thought he could play left field, and he ended up being a league average-ish left fielder. So I give Schwarber the credit that he deserves there, that he could do that at first base as well. If that ends up being the case, then Bobby Dahlbeck's really in some trouble. I do not want to be adding him in head-to-head 12-team points leagues.
Those last 3 weeks, though, for Dahlbeck, 326, 420, 721 for the slash line, 4 homers. Again,
when you've got that pop, right? You can go on those sorts of runs, but I'm not totally buying it, especially with Schwarber getting into this lineup now.
Yeah, could be a bit of a playing time issue for Dahlbeck. So tread carefully there, Alfonso. See if you can find somebody else on the wire to take over that first base or that corner infield spot for you. Let's take a look at a few relievers. Not a lot has changed since last week. There's still a decent number of leagues where Alex Holomé is out there. I know in more competitive leagues he's long gone, but Taylor Rogers still down with that finger injury. 5 saves for Holomé since August 3rd. So at least in those shallow leagues where he's still out there, I think he's worth a pickup given how clustered together saves are in most rotisserie leagues.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really no question about it. He's getting those saves. He's getting that opportunity, and we'll see what happens when Rogers does come back. We've seen Colin be a very effective closer in the past, and a guy who people always seem to want to assume that he is going to lose the closer's job, and we saw the results of what bad Colin can look like earlier this season, but we're seeing what good Colin looks like too, so I'm not totally sold that he would just hand the ninth totally back when Rogers does return. So yeah, Colin, easy guy to get on board with right now.
And it just seems like he has a much larger share of the save opportunities in Minnesota than a lot of the other alternatives that we're looking at for saves have in their respective bullpens. I think that applies to Michael Gibbons, who from a talent perspective, I've always believed in. I don't know why it's his fate to always be in a hitter-friendly environment, or at least an environment that boosts home runs. I mean, going from Baltimore to Colorado, now to Cincinnati, it just adds a lot of volatility to his profile. I think he's a good reliever, not necessarily a lockdown elite one. But are you bidding on Gibbons right now, expecting him to at least have a large share of the Reds' save opportunities? I think he's got the last 2 going back to last week, but this still smells like a committee situation to me.
If I really need saves and I'm okay taking a guy who's going to make some appearances where he's not getting saves, then sure. But this has just been a mess all season, and there hasn't been any one guy going back to Amir Garrett at the very start of the season to Lucas Sims a couple of months ago. I mean, no one in this bullpen has taken the job and run with it, and I think it would be folly to expect that to happen in the middle of August. So Gibbons is fine if you're really hard up for saves and you are comfortable with a guy who is maybe going to make some non-save appearances and maybe not strike too many guys out in those non-save appearances, then fine. But it's a very low bid for me. I just don't really see this being enough of a ownership of that closer's role to really move the needle in a major way.
Yeah, whereas I see going maybe 5+% on column A, maybe even up to 7 if I'm really hurting for saves. It's near a min bid for me on Gibbons where he's out there because Amir Garrett's healthy, Lucas Sims is healthy, Heath Hembry's healthy, Michael Lorenzen's healthy. They actually have more options now than they've had at any point this season, and I feel like they're going to really lean into that because it seems like something that organization is really trying to prioritize at this point. We are going to go, before we go, I should say you should check out the subscriptions to The Athletic right now, 33% off at theathletic.com/fantasy baseball podcast. So be sure to grab that if you want to get that discount. It comes out to $3.99 a month on the first year. So really nice deal. All the coverage we have, not only for the rest of the fantasy baseball season, but fantasy football season is here as well. Draft weekend's already starting to pick up. A lot of great coverage there. Be sure to check out the Athletic Fantasy Football Podcast if you're not listening to that already. You can hear Beller on that almost every day. Jake Seeley, Brandon Funston, Nando DeFino, Brandon Marion Lee, Chris Vaccaro, really nice group that we've got there this season. Every once in a while I pop on the shows, but really it's just to kind of patch over the occasional schedule holes, not to provide any sort of deep insight into the game.
Don't sell yourself short, Judge. You're a tremendous slouch.
Exactly. That's very well played. So on Twitter, he's at MBeller. I am at Derek Van Riper. We got a special edition of this podcast coming up soon. We're going to dive into Ian's Dynasty rankings. That should come out before we get to our next episode of Under the Radar. But after that, we are back with Under the Radar on Tuesday.